Well, friends, I just want to say welcome to our United for Action representatives today, Reverend Clare Novak, who we all love so well, and Cathie Foley, who has been the director of the emergency warming shelter in Truckee, and so has been boots on the ground in terms of homelessness and housing in this insecurity in this community for a very, very long time. And I know that is something, hey, Rachel, near and dear also to Claire's part, and she's been a big instigator in organizing around this issue. We are in an education phase, right? So I know from conversations with a lot of you that some of us didn't even know the problem was as big as it is, right? If it doesn't affect us personally, we might not be aware, but this affects every layer, every fiber, the fabric of our community. And so it's extremely important that we as St. Pat's know what's going on so we can prayerfully discern how we can be a part of transformation in our beloved basin. So with that, Claire and Cathie, thank you so much for being here, friends.
Thank you. I'm going to return the thanks in the way of gratitude to say thank you to the Outreach Committee. Thank you to the vestry for being strong supporters of United for Action. Thank you to all the members of this congregation who have supported, worked, and donated for many of United for Action's initiatives. You may know me, but you may not know this coalition, so let me say a little bit about that from the top. We're a coalition of faith-based organizations and nonprofits in North Tahoe, Truckee, and we collaborate with our other community partners to focus on our neighbors' basic needs: food, shelter, housing, and clothing. And as Sarah said, my partner today here is Cathie Foley. Anywhere where Cathie shows up, I said, I'm there. I'm in on it with you. And we've been on a lot of projects, but she is the real expert on homelessness today. She is the program director of North Tahoe, Truckee Homeless Services. And we do know that everyone here at St. Patrick's is trying to discern how to best help our neighbors who are struggling to find or to hold on to their housing. So what we're going to do today is first give you information about the housing crisis and homelessness, and then we're going to open it up to discussion. So if we're zipping along really fast and you hear something you want to ask about, please hold on to it, because we do want to have a good discussion at the end of our presentation. Let's begin with prayer. Holy One, watch over all your children, especially those with no homes to return to at the end of long and weary days. Protect them from harm and keep them from despair, and open the hearts and eyes of those of us with blessings to share. Unite our voices in a call for justice, so that no neighbor ever needs to lie down for the night on the cold ground because they have no home. So that no parents ever need to tuck their children into the backseat of their car because they have no home. So that no child ever needs to wonder, when will I feel safe, because they have no home. Remind us all that we cannot rest fully secure in our own homes each night until all your children are, at last, home. Amen. And so we begin. Let's see, where do I? Okay, I'll just raise my hand. Thank you. Thanks, Nora. As we draw together, let's think about our shared home at Lake Tahoe. And this gorgeous photo by Marty Gullery reminds us that this is not only a place of majestic beauty, this is a sacred place. And please pause to reflect on how you came to live here on the land of the Washoe. What drew you to Tahoe, and what has held you here? How has this area changed before your eyes? And as you reflect, please consider that each person you meet here has their own story of belonging. Our Tahoe neighbors come from many different origins and backgrounds with different languages, different gifts, different skills, each with their own dreams of settling and thriving here. And so I ask, who belongs here? We need everyone for the health of our community, for the strength of our economy, and for true meaning in our spiritual lives. But sadly, many of our neighbors are being cut out of our community fabric. Today you'll hear facts about a regional housing crisis that's been building for years, and you may not be surprised. You've probably seen the human story with your own eyes, or lived it here on the North Shore, particularly in the area that today we're calling Washoe Tahoe, and that's Incline Village in Crystal Bay. And I'm relying today on an excellent report on Washoe Tahoe that was published in September. It was commissioned by the Tahoe Prosperity Center. And it shows that over the past decade, there's been no growth in affordable, accessible housing for our workers. And I mean our teachers, our clergy, our restaurant, resort, and retail employees, our public servants, and especially those who supply services to us locals and all our visitors. The lowest paying service jobs account for 42% of all the employment opportunities in Washoe Tahoe. And hourly wages in these jobs have risen somewhat, but that hasn't been enough to close the wide gap between housing costs and take-home pay. And what has this done to our community fabric? With affordable, accessible housing in short supply, the steady population trend has been away from younger, working singles and family households toward older, more affluent residents, many retired or only living here occasionally. And that trend accelerated during the pandemic as employers had to reduce staff and hours for their workers. Along with this, there was a wave of newcomers arriving, wanting to escape congested areas and to work remotely. So what was the effect? Our housing inventory became even tighter as these new buyers came, driving prices up, and both sales prices and sales volume skyrocketed. How high? Well, from January 2020 to January 2021, median sales prices for homes in Washoe Tahoe increased 79%. And as prices continued to rise, 2/3 of the homes for sale in June 2021 were priced over $1 million. So home buying was now absolutely outside the reach of many longtime residents. And rents soared during the pandemic. Even if long-term renters could afford these hikes, many of them were told to find a new place to live. Now, of the Washoe Tahoe residents who were surveyed in this Tahoe Prosperity Report in 2021, over 40%, that's about 570 renter households, were forced to move in recent years because their rental was sold, or it was converted to a short-term rental, or the owner moved in. And you can testify on that, Sarah. We know this story. So where could the displaced renters move? Well, their options are very limited in Washoe Tahoe. You can see here that 90% of the housing units here are single-family residences or townhouses, which are largely out of the reach to buy or to rent long-term. And we just don't have enough apartments to ensure workers stable, secure housing. And most of the homes sit empty. Less than half of our single-family residences are occupied by locals. You can see, only 49%. So the majority, 51%, remain vacant. mostly second or vacation homes. So, no wonder that recent data show that 65% of primary service employees must now commute to Washoe Tahoe to keep their jobs. Okay, this is a little hard to read, so I'm gonna interpret for you. What would the ideal housing picture be if we wanted a diverse, vibrant community and economy? Well, housing for residents and workforce would be in balance. We'd have options to rent or buy that are accessible to a wide range of incomes. And I mean for entry-level service workers who are earning $14 to $18 an hour, to managers earning around $100,000, or to our seniors on fixed incomes. So we'd also have a range of options suited to different life stages. So that means for new graduates, for young families, for empty nesters, we'd have a healthy mix. It might look like a balanced rainbow up here. But how do we match up to that picture? Well, this graph tells us 62%, or 2/3 of the population in Washoe Tahoe, is in this green end of the scale. So it looks balanced here, but 2/3 are in that green area, and that's upper income, high income households. So the current market provides rental housing for this group, earning $90K or more each year. And only those in the far right, the upper and high income categories, $110,000 a year and above, can afford to buy homes. Smaller and older condos are about the only choice until households earn about $188,000 a year or more. So, big picture. Washoe Tahoe community members in this green end of the scale represent 68% of owners and 47% of renters. And so clearly, the rest of our neighbors, the 39% in the categories colored orange and red, are squeezed in the current market. And these are our neighbors making $90,000 a year and less in the middle, lower middle, moderate, and low income categories. And all combined, these residents make up only 33% of owners and 53% of renters. And we know that those at the very lowest income levels face real risk of homelessness, or they've just got to leave. So the general strategy to support housing for our low, moderate, and middle income workers and residents in our community involves two factors, and those are subsidies, both federal and local, and also local housing and development policies that we can develop to support this necessary part of our population. But we need to be aware and effective to do this. Now, so far, I've been sharing what's happening in graphs and charts. I don't think in graphs and charts. I think in stories. So let me share some voices from the Tahoe Prosperity Center surveys to make this point with heart. Our neighbors are being priced out and pushed out. And listen to their voices. Please do something to stop the loss of residents. I will lose my teaching job because not enough families are able to live here. The situation is beyond a crisis. I resided in 16 different places in 5 years. The lack of housing caused ongoing stress in my life for 6 years. The hourly wage offered by local businesses doesn't come close enough to afford rent, let alone save to purchase a place of your own. It is also not affordable to rent off the hill and commute up to Incline. Employees that cannot live in Washoe Tahoe essentially take a pay cut because of the cost of commuting. And our economy is slowed or stuttering. Listen to employers' voices. Employees losing their housing has the biggest impact on our ability to retain employees. We've had to close certain days because we can't find employees, which hurts our bottom line. 9 teachers are currently losing their housing. Something needs to be done. You don't have a community when your workers are not living here. Yes, let me repeat that point. You don't have a community when your workers are not living here. Our community fabric is strained. This crisis is damaging our health, our environment, our community spirit, and our quality of life. So I say, let's heal our community. If you work in Lake Tahoe, you should be able to live in Lake Tahoe. So, what is being done? We're happy to share some hopeful news today. I think you're ready for some hopeful news. Say amen to that, because this is a hard situation, but take a breath of relief, because solutions are being worked on. There are new partnerships forming. And partnerships are very important because, you know, North Shore Lake Tahoe is all unincorporated. So that means leadership for change needs to come from within the community rather than largely from elected officials. So representatives of all the groups listed here are joining together to work toward action plans. The Incline Village Crystal Bay Community and Business Association, that's a mouthful, IVCBA, and the Parasol Foundation just recently sponsored a Washoe Tahoe Community Collaborative Summit. Isn't that a good word, a summit? We want to get on top of this on April 13th. And Sarah and Cathie and I were all there, and the number one concern voiced all around the room from representatives from all sectors, you guessed it, housing, because it affects us all. And I've recently joined the Washoe Tahoe Workforce Housing Partnership on behalf of United for Action. And this is going to be a new coalition right now under the umbrella of the Tahoe Prosperity Center, this economic regional development group that created this great report. And United for Action, definitely, we're going to keep the outreach committee here, we're going to keep the vestry all informed about what's happening in these new partnerships. You all are part of it. I know St. Patrick's is a member of the IVCBA, as United for Action is also. And there are new strategies too. There's no silver bullet. Aren't you shocked to hear that? That there's not one thing to do? We've got to pull together and we've got to have a range of strategies. We can increase the housing inventory, and that's got to be a combination of programs of new building, preserving existing homes, and also unlocking existing stock and all these places sitting empty. That's part of the work that's being done by a group called Landing Locals. I'd love to tell you more about that too. We especially need to build stable rental housing, and this means apartments and not more owner-leased condos and townhomes. And we can revisit TRPA and zoning and rental policies. I'm sure you're hip to what's going on about short-term rentals, accessory dwelling units. There's a lot of attention on that. We can make policies that help relieve the pressure here and put preference for local workers, and we can adopt new housing programs that would help renters purchase homes, and I can get down in the weeds on that, but there's a lot we can do on new housing programs, as well as supporting public transit options. This is a big deal, how transportation is linked to our housing story here, right? Because between Washoe Tahoe and Reno Sparks or Carson City, there are not many options. Just people are having to drive, and that costs more and more. And we can engage the community. Here we are. We're doing it right here. You're part of that strategy. And all these partnerships and strategies take a lot of forward action and involvement in time. Jim, was talking to Cathie and me about that at the beginning. These things take time. It's true. But there's very helpful work that's going on right now for our most vulnerable neighbors who've been chronically homeless or who've been made newly homeless during this pandemic crunch. And Cathie's going to tell us about those direct services and how we can support our unhoused neighbors who are at greatest risk.
All right, good morning, everybody. Thank you, Claire, so much for giving the big picture, because the housing crisis is a huge picture. I'm going to share just a smaller portion, which is started with our neighbors that are truly, literally homeless. And a quick history of North Tahoe Truckee Homeless Services. It began in 2014 around a table. Claire was part of a discussion at a United for Action meeting, and we started to share stories of the fact that there was no type of emergency shelters in the winter. We shared stories of people we knew had passed away, whether it was outside the post office in Truckee or in the bathrooms at Kings Beach or in their cars in ski resort areas. And that group of people made a commitment to do some research and figure out how in this area of so much wealth and so much of privilege that we could at least have a place on the most severe weather nights where people who were homeless had a place to stay. And so in 2015, we were grateful to pull it together and be able to open for our very first night on December 24th in the lower level of Church of the Mountains, who donated the space that year for a pilot program. And at the end of that year, everyone was in agreement that it was something that needed to continue, and we didn't know what form that would be in. But as a grassroots effort, volunteers and people came together in order to keep the project going. And it was a small emergency warming center until March of 2020 when COVID hit. When COVID hit, it was very apparent that there were a lot of people who now had no place to go get a cup of coffee. They had no place to take a shower. We had people who were living in their cars that couldn't go to the health center and take a shower in the morning. And so we started to see those increases of numbers of people who had no place to shelter in place. And we were able to skip a lot of the zoning issues that come up, and we were able to get funding through Placer and Nevada County to expand and open an emergency day center. And so we began opening with a place to give people information about COVID, to provide them the PPE gear stuff that they needed as we all learned about this together, and provide people a place to have a meal and a shower and connection to other services. And so 3 months into that, we realized that this pandemic was going to go on for a long time. We still didn't really know what it looked like. And we were able to reach out to an organization called AMI Housing, which has been around since 2006, based out of Auburn. They provide housing that stands for Advocates for the Mentally Ill Housing. And they had recently partnered with Placer County and purchased the Seven Pines Motel over in Kings Beach with some of the Project Home Key funding that you may have heard about during that time. And they purchased that property with the goal to turn it into supportive housing. And so they've been working really hard to make that happen. I'm very excited to say they actually finally broke ground last week. It took them that long to get through the planning process and get people in line. But hopefully by the end of the summer, if not hopefully by winter, we'll have 12 units of supportive housing in this region for the first time ever. And so we partnered with them. They absorbed the Emergency Warming Center program. They created a DBA called North Tahoe Truckee Homeless Services. At that time, that linked us to federal funding. We were given a large amount of federal funding from both Placer and Nevada County for the Emergency Solution Grants, COVID funds, and we were able to build a strong support system for our neighbors that are literally homeless and newly homeless. And so up here, these two pictures are just examples of why I and our team and the community keeps working together. The woman on the left that's what it looks like when you've been living outside for 15 years and you haven't had a support system around you to enable you to get into a supportive housing situation. And so right before Christmas, a year and a half ago, she was able to get into housing, and it's transformed her life. The picture on the right is a picture of myself and a longtime local Truckee member who joined us at the Warming Center for the first 3 years. He's around town. We got to know each other pretty well, and through consistent care and meeting him where he was at, he finally agreed and took the responsibility to join the Salvation Army program down in Reno and really commit to changing his life. And now he's 3.5 years sober, and he has a healthy relationship with his daughter, and like you said, praise God. That with that support around people who don't have safety nets, who don't have families, who don't have that extended support, we can help people transform their lives. And so that's the brief history. So through North Tahoe Truckee Homeless Services, we have funding that'll continue through August. We're in the process of working to find the funding to continue the project. Hopefully for this year to start with, but continuing forward. We've extended a lease at Church of the Mountains to be able to use their spaces again until June of 2023 in hopes of finding a permanent location at some point in time. But to start with, we have 4 main programs that we offer to the community, and the Emergency Day Respite Center is open currently 3 days a week, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays from 9 until 2 in the afternoon. And during our time with the Warming Center, since March of 2020, we've had 566 individual guests. We've had a total of 5,576 guests come to visit. So that's the people who come on a regular basis built into that. That's total guest visits. We've served over 11,000 meals, provided over 2,500 showers, and over 923 loads of laundry. All those basic things. Yes?
Where is this? Where's the location?
So that location, we've ended up back in the lower level of Church of the Mountains. So that's over in Truckee. And so although we're in Truckee and we're funded majority from Placer and Nevada County, we've always made it a goal to take care of the entire region. The same year we started the Warming Center, South Lake Tahoe started the Tahoe Warm Room, and those 2 organizations have really tried to bridge the entire gap. So we definitely do have guests that have come from the Crystal Bay Incline Village side. The numbers aren't as high. The reason we've landed in Truckee right now is that the highest numbers are in Nevada County, being right off of I-80, and that Church of the Mountains has been generous enough to let us pretty much take over their church. Thank you for asking that. That's an important one. And then we have the emergency, so in addition to those basic necessities that all of us take for granted, whether it's being tired of doing laundry, for someone who can't do laundry, it's a huge gift to have that opportunity. And so in addition to that, we were able to start some pretty comprehensive case management, helping people with the basic needs of collecting documentation, whether it's an ID or a social security card, which are all needed to get a job or to get into any type of housing, help people with housing applications, and a lot of time we're helping people make the decision to move out of the area and reconnecting them potentially with family or other more comprehensive services. The Emergency Warming Center, we just finished up our season. It's between November and April each year. You'll see that the triggers to open are very severe. But this past year, we've been open 45 nights. We had 59 individual guests. We provide 288 overnight stays. 34 times we've had people come just to join us for dinner or to be part of a community. And since 2015, when we began, we've provided 1,883 nights for people that didn't have to sleep in their car or didn't have to sleep outside. The other piece we were able to expand upon in this region, in 2016, Placer and Nevada County realized that it was important to start with some homeless outreach where people could go meet people where they're at, let them know about the services, albeit limited. And so there was a homeless outreach position created. Through this funding, we've been able to, that position was with Sierra Community House. It now rests within our organization. And we have 2 employees that support that full-time person so that when people are going out to meet people, they're doing that in a team type setting. And then through the funding, we had opportunities for rapid rehousing and housing support, which really allowed us to help our chronically homeless neighbors, which are people that have lived outside for over a year or had instances of homelessness that leads up to at least a year. In addition, they have disabilities, in addition to the large number of newly homeless people that have arrived via COVID or that we're seeing much more of. And so then this is a huge celebration time. For all the years I've been doing this, each season we've been able to provide housing for 2 or 3 people. 90% of the time it was out of the area, which was still a joy to put somebody into a house in Carson City that their disability was going to allow them to continue to be in. But this year we were able to house 39 neighbors. 37 households. And that came through the ability to help people with their first month's and last month's rent, to help people with their utility bills, help people with their utility deposits, which in Truckee it's $400 to turn on your Southwest gas. The ability to help people with funding over a period of months to help subsidize their rent, maybe while they're in the process of getting Social Security in place. Maybe they've been homeless and living in their car, so only able to work a certain number of hours, but they're sure once they're stable in a home that they'll be able to work another job or work at least full time. And having that funding available, in addition to, there were 288 units of, you call it below income rate housing, low income housing that came available in between Placer and Nevada County, most of those over in Truckee. Some of those units were put aside for as HUD 811 units, which means they're for neighbors who have disabilities, who are adults with disabilities, along with many units that allowed our neighbors that are on Social Security and our retired folks to, when they couldn't get into the senior center in Truckee or other non-existent senior housing in this area, move into these units and pay 30% of their income towards their housing instead of market rate. And so one question I always get is, well, who are you putting into these houses? And so by this breakdown, you can see that the majority of people we're serving, we have many people who come through this area and use the services for a short period of time, but the majority of people we're trying to serve are our neighbors that have been here a really long time. And so 59% of those neighbors that we've put into housing this last year have been here 10 years or longer. And so that's a huge celebration. That okay. That would be perfect. Yes, thank you. Nice to see you. Yeah, I was going to say, so I've had exactly. Thank you. Kevin too, and the kids. The big kids. And so that's what happens when the counties and individuals and organizations come together to really realize what is happening in our community and where we can step in to support. And so I was sharing, the upfront costs that you help people with that really allow people to get into housing. It's almost impossible to come up with the first month's, last month rent and all the down payments for security deposits when you're living paycheck to paycheck. But it also really requires other support. So of the 39 neighbors that have gone into housing, 31 are still supported with some sort of case management. Some of that may come from our organization. Some of that may come by being able to connect people to county services, to other groups, to really help people build a system around them. Sometimes people choose that they want to start attending a church. Other people choose that they want to start the local fly fishing club or something at the library, but really helping people to get into a community and build that support system around them. Work hard to help people connect to volunteer opportunities, to find flexible job opportunities for folks who haven't maybe worked for full-time for a long period of time, who are accepted as they are and able to jump into a work opportunity. And it's exciting. I've heard that it takes like 2 years before you can really chart your experiences of putting people into housing and how many people turn over and how many people stay. But I'll let you know in 2 years what that looks like. So I shared about the Brown Bear supportive housing. So supportive housing would be an experience where you might have 12 units, and then there's somebody who's living on site helping you with your case management, helping you if you need help with doctor's appointments or medication management or job experience, and there's someone on site that helps those neighbors all work together. And so Brown Bear Studios will be the first opportunity for that to happen. I really hope it'll be the end of the summer. Claire will keep you posted on that. Send us prayers. And then there's another property in Truckee that hopefully, and this is probably at least 2 years out, will have 10 units of supportive housing, because the goal is to have enough varieties of housing on that rainbow that Claire shared, that when people need to find a new place to live in their fabric of our community, that they're able to find someplace. And so there's a continual flow of different types of housing available. And this slide shares on the Placer-Tahoe side. This is from Mountain Housing Council. And Claire will share the numbers for the Washoe-Tahoe side. But it's been found that in the Placer, Nevada, Tahoe-Truckee School District, there's a lack of about 9,500 units in order to house our neighbors that are currently working here and inadequately housed, people who are commuting into the region but would really like to live here and be part of the community that they're serving, as well as when we have our J1s and other folks that come out to this area to work at these resorts, they aren't even able to find a place to live 8 to a 2-bedroom house like they used to do. They can't find places to do that, and they're in their cars. And then we have our folks that are literally homeless. So on the Placer, Nevada side, there's the last point in time count that was done, there were 54 individuals that were literally homeless, living outdoors year-round. We have a system where with street outreach and with the services, we're continually getting to know those people. We're continually having people come in from the Nevada Washoe County side. We have a few people that trickle in from the El Dorado County side, far on the west shore, but we really try to, the goal is to get to know those neighbors by name and understand what people need so that we can continue to take tiny steps forward to making that difference in the housing for our really most vulnerable neighbors. And at this point, I'm going to hand it back to Claire.
So what do the numbers look like for Washoe-Tahoe? You just saw 9,500 needed in the Tahoe-Truckee area. The Tahoe Prosperity Center report said we need at least 1,200 just in Incline Village and Crystal Bay in these same categories, just to catch up with people who are working here inadequately housed, people who are commuting in, or people who are going to retire. And who's going to come in to take their jobs? They may want to stay here. That doesn't necessarily open up units. Just to underline this, I heard recently that over the past 10 years, there's been maybe a 1% increase in housing stock, but just in the last year, there's been a 5% increase in population. So you can see what that disparity is, just to catch up. More people coming in, not enough housing stock. So, what can St. Patrick's do? We've given you a lot to hear, to feel, to think about, and we always want to end on some kind of encouragement about steps we can all take. First, I want to say, envision and pray. Imagine the community that you'd like to live in, diverse, vibrant, balanced, and put your heart and your prayer into imagining that future. You know, the word parish is often used to just describe the members in a church, but a parish traditionally means the whole area around you. Please consider your parish being this whole area of Washoe, Tahoe, and this region. We're all connected. You know, you're back and forth across the state line over and over again. Those who are across the counter with you at Rayleigh's, maybe living up in Truckee or over in Tallahassee. We're all connected across these many jurisdictional lines. Let's imagine ourselves as one community and know this community. And this means to engage and to educate. And this can be to connect to these different public entities that are forming, private and public, other churches. None of us can do this together. We're all looking at this problem and needing to work in coalition. The IVCBA and Rotary have been involved, the civic groups and foundations, and I'll put in a plug for United for Action, that this is a community coalition that's been around for a long time, that's trying to connect faith-based groups with social service agencies. Know what's going on around you and stand up for your neighbors. There are going to be opportunities for you to advocate and lead when it comes to changing policies or reviewing them. It really matters, not only when individuals write and stand up, but an entire congregation does. We saw this in the Emergency Warming Center. When we showed up with the town of Truckee, I wasn't just Clare Novak. I could say, I'm here for United for Action, and our 100+ members. It rings differently, and it matters, because there are a lot of not in my backyard people. I acknowledge that. But there are yes in my backyard people too, and we need to stand up and be counted. And finally, Cathie allows me to give this part because it's my pitch to support and give to North Tahoe Truckee Homeless Services. This is an organization that is doing so much, that is changing lives. We know it's compassion, we know it's care, but it's also money. And it takes all of that to do what we're all about, which is loving our neighbors. If we remember anything from this presentation, it's love your neighbors, because the stress on all of us that we're seeing is going to take a whole community response of love. So thanks for listening to us a long time. The bells were ringing, the music was playing. I know we took our time, but what we'd like to open up to now is some discussion and questions. This is information about how to stay in touch with us, how to find out through their newsletter updates, advising how to connect with North Tahoe Truckee Homeless Services. Yeah, Jeff.
I was just thinking out loud, which is always dangerous for me, but it seems like the presentation here that you're mostly is California-centric, and it's great because God bless what you do, because Incline gets the benefit from the California tax base and the California support and everything, but it seems like about 1% or less of the presentation has to do with Washoe County or the Incline Village or any government agencies. So what I'm trying to say, a long way, is that there's this thing, we've had this property tax in legislature. Our values of property have probably doubled. People that own $1 million homes or $500,000 homes, whatever it is, they've doubled in the last 3 years. At some point, there'll be an assessment, and the property taxes for all of us will go up. Is there any thought given to a potential legislative solution involving the Nevada legislature or the Washoe County Commission or some legislative body, not California,
Right.
let's talk about Nevada now,
Nevada. Okay.
where somebody in Nevada can say, this is what's happening in Incline Village, this is what's happening in Crystal Bay, whatever. Let's, when that tax revenue comes in, we're talking a long-term solution, let's designate a healthy portion of that increased tax revenue to the homeless. I mean, the volunteer, we give generously to the homeless volunteer organizations as well, but I'm talking about, we've all benefited hugely from this rise in property values, and that at the same time has just really put down or hurt the homeless community, made more homeless because of our benefit.
Well said.
So that's what I'm saying, maybe there's a way, is there a legislative advocate, not California, mind you,
We're going to focus Nevada here. Yes.
is there somebody that knows the legislature, a lobbyist, or somebody that can talk to a senator or assemblyman that can say, this is, the taxes are going to go
I want to thank you for talking out loud on the fly. Thank you. You raised the conversation to a good place. Let me say that I affirm everything that you've said, and the fact that all the data and the action is a little behind on this side of the state line. More has been done on the California side. Partly, I'll just bring up, Truckee is incorporated. All these areas unincorporated here around the lake have an impact on how action is able to be taken. Also, in Washoe County, a lot of the attention is down the hill in the Reno area. When action is taken on a homeless problem or on, that's where the attention is. But again, a hopeful note, IVCBA in particular and this new Washoe Tahoe Workforce Housing Partnership is engaging the county in a new way. They're present at these formational meetings, they're listening, but it's gonna take local community voices like yours to try to push this, to make a more equitable solution that pulls Washoe Tahoe into the conversation for Washoe County, and that's funding and political decisions. I'm very hopeful about this new partnership and about the strategies that are laid out in this report. And some of them do focus on, I talked about that 1% housing stock going up. Those have been mostly these mega mansions and the second homes, and how we address how those homeowners or those housing policies reflect a reality of people supporting the economy here. That's going to take new alliances. So thank you for pointing out we're moving here, but we need to move quickly to meet those kinds of marks that you're talking about, how money gets allocated. I think I saw Brad, we'll go Brad, Connie, Judy, okay?
Well, I just wanted to, I think we're all aware of the challenges of not having local representation. And so I want to thank Cathie and HTS and Child Prosperity Center. It seems like on the red end of the spectrum, starting to gain traction as a community because of work. So thank you. I'm really excited to see what this church and their collaboration with other churches and other community groups can do in that yellow section. The firefighters, the teachers, the police force, these vital members of our community that we have to keep in this community or we're not safe. We don't have people to respond when we're in an emergency situation. So I'm really excited to see what we can discuss there in that area.
Amen.
Subsidy
Preach.
for those people in particular.
Exactly, and I've heard that called the missing middle, and you just described it so well. But again, we can, we talk in statistics, but who's going to be teaching your children? Who's going to be answering that 911 call? Who's going to be checking you out at the grocery store or bringing your food to the table or just being down the street? Who are our neighbors? And because this is such a fluid community, we often lose sight of that. Do you live here? Are you local? Are you here a snowbird? Who are you? We've got to say, we all belong here. And as you say, if you work in Lake Tahoe, you should be able to live in Lake Tahoe. I heard a catchphrase the other day. Somebody said, we always talk about keep Tahoe blue. Maybe we ought to start talking about keep Tahoe housed. Connie.
I think that some of this also is not just for Tahoe and Washoe. I think it's not just here, but it's also in Reno. And recently, a gal who is a manicurist, and you've been praying for her, Tanya,
Thank you.
There's a wider picture here. We're concerned with Tahoe and Incline in Crystal Bay, but if you have to move from here, where do you move down there? They're building apartments and they're very expensive, number one.
Right, right.
Number two, I think I've heard some people talk about when they have a building permit to put up multiple apartment complex here. I think there is one that they've been talking about for Tahoe Boulevard and the old Stanley's location. If the legislators and the county commissioners and the town, Incline, would think about having an alternative to, if you put up X number of units, you're going to have to put up X number of expensive units. You're going to have to put up X number of workforce housing units.
Thank you. I don't know if,
At one point, we had a couple of places up here that were done behind the Wells Fargo and over by the Sunshine Valley that were built for that purpose. But, contractors have to understand you can't just have these huge or large complexes of expensive apartments and not have some help for workforce. So that's another area that maybe
amen.
be considered.
Amen. And it's going to take, some of it has to do with zoning to make sure that, maybe you say you're putting up affordable housing, but down the road you're going to convert it into condos. There needs to be some breaks on that. There needs to be a look again at TRPA restrictions, things about maximum density, about coverage, about setbacks. They do these analyses, and the way the regulations are now, it's often not possible to put up anything but a single family unit because we want to protect the environment, but are there other ways that we can achieve that goal and have more multi-family units? Cathie, I don't know if you want to talk at all about those kinds of requirements on affordable housing.
So I've only got two comments to make. One on the Washoe County side, at the ICVBA summit of 2 weeks ago is the first time that many Washoe County people were there. And I was able to put face to face with the head of Health and Human Services there. And so able to connect with her and see what can possibly happen up here. So it was very hopeful to have those folks at the table. And then, over in Truckee, Tahoe, mostly Truckee, that's exactly what they've done a lot of, is the place where in the past they would allow people to build the really expensive houses, and then they'd say, we've got it in Luffy, and instead of building these other ones, we're just gonna give you the money. Now they're requiring the workforce housing to be built first, and then the rest of the housing can go from there. And they're really doing a lot of the below income rate housing that came available was from developers outside of the area that are used to layering all the different federal tax credits and things that go into, great, we can have 12 units that are HUD 811. Those are for neighbors that maybe don't have any income. We're going to have 10 units that are people who are going to be restricted to 30% of the area median income, and they pay a percentage. And those requirements, and by meeting those requirements, then the federal government kicks in. But it also required the community, like some of that land was actually donated. So it requires other portions of the community to come in and donate the land because it is so expensive to build. And so I'm excited, really, that it feels this year for the first time like we do have more of a regional approach. Like you're saying, if you live here and you become homeless here and you've been part of the workforce, it's stressful enough to have to move to Reno. But then if you get to Reno and there's nothing, and you don't have family someplace else that's welcoming you in, and you don't have those support systems, I agree completely that it definitely shortens your life.
Practical question. You talked about people getting to these facilities, the warming facility, meals, other things. My question is, what if they don't have a car? How do they get around to receive services?
So a lot of folks, the first time they come, they'll call and say, I'm stuck over here and I have no way to get there, and we'll help with we'll help with a taxi ride over there. And then at that point in time, it's trying to figure out, how does the bus system work? Unfortunately, our public transportation in this area is not that good. Between Truckee, Tahoe City, Incline, et cetera. So a lot of folks do end up using public transportation. With the implementation of an outreach coordinator, we're hopeful that sometime we'll have a van available. We'll be able to purchase a vehicle that could help with some of those individual cases. We have volunteers that bring people over. But the main piece, and so in the winter, a lot of times the police or the sheriff's department will bring people over so that they can sleep there at night when they find them outside. But it's raising that awareness and inviting, even we have volunteers that it's like, okay, Joe needs a ride over and then Joe needs a ride to get his prescriptions. Can you help with that? And really just trying to build those systems because they're not in place. But if you find someone sleeping outside on a night that we're open, or somebody who wants information on the services, we'll definitely get them there the first time and then brainstorm how they can continue to engage. Bye. Nice to see you, Connie. Thank you.
Where I'm from, we had in our group of churches a thing called Urban Inn during the winter time. Is that a possibility here, that you could shelter people during the winter months in the church?
So I come from Michigan, and they do that back in Michigan on a very regular basis. When we started the Emergency Warming Center, the challenge was, at least on the Truckee side, I can tell you, like, the churches, you can't just open your doors and provide overnight. We had to go through a lot of permitting to be able to use even Church of the Mountains for that purpose. And then once again, the churches aren't located that closely together where public transportation works. And then we have a fairly small number of homeless neighbors compared to a city, and that's why it's a challenge to try to really serve people from Incline, Tahoe City, Kings Beach, although it's only, like you're saying, it may only be 12 miles over there, but unless you have a van in place and all these other supports, it is hard to do. So it hasn't gone that direction because of those pieces, but I could see at some time that could possibly work as a way to do that. But it's also people who are in that situation to have a hard time remembering, oh, I should be at Incline at this church this week, and now I need to be over in Truckee at this church. And so because we've been able to keep that location, it's been easier for people to know where to find us than track a system or come up with something else. But I agree that those systems definitely do work. It's for some reason not as easy here. Yes?
Oh, that's okay. Go for it. Thank you for staying so long. If you need to go, please do.
Yes.
That's certainly a lot of things that families
Yep.
will cut out in order to be able to feed and house.
Yep.
Who's handling those kinds of issues with smaller scale?
So I would say, our goal with the homeless neighbors and then Sierra Community House really fills a void for the families that are struggling as far as helping them get on those services. But then as far as, like I hear you saying, the fact that over in Truckee, for example, if you're on Medi-Cal, in order to go to the dentist, you need to go to Placerville. Like, how do you get to Placerville, right? Or if you've got an old car that has to go that far with the cost of gas, like you said, you put it off and you don't go. I did that raising my kids. And so there's been conversations about different groups. Once again, a lot of times it comes down to small individual groups. The county steps in, and maybe one time a month they organize a bus that goes down to the Auburn area. And so there's different things like that. But when we talk about transportation as being one of the solutions, it is for those reasons too, to make it easy for people to connect.
So there's no free clinic services for the underserved?
So in Kings Beach, there's Western Sierra Medical Clinic. And that is one option for a Medi-Cal provider or a patient. And then a lot of other times, most of the time, they end up in the emergency room. And that's where it comes down to the piece of, okay, well, we're serving these neighbors in the emergency room. How much is that costing us in comparison to coming up with a solution that allows people to meet them where they're at, gives them the advocacy to go and get their needs met versus showing up at the emergency room once they haven't, or once their kid's sick enough that they really are afraid versus, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I saw on one of your earlier slides, Claire, that you were looking at a
so I think there have been attempts to negotiate with landlords on rents, and it's tough to do. It's a hot market. But I'll just mention the one group, Landing Locals, which is trying to unlock existing homes. So if your home is sitting empty, it's trying to give incentives, particularly in the town of Truckee, for that property owner to rent to a local. The owner gets a certain amount of subsidy. I don't know if it will knock the rent down a lot, but it gives them the awareness and the incentive to go a little lower. And, we're not going to build our way out of this problem. There's just not enough land. There are so many restraints. We've got to do better with the housing stock that already exists. And this involves that kind of rental. It also involves some deed restrictions that give priority and preference to locals. We've got to work smarter here, but also stable rentals are at a premium. We need to have, instead of a new luxury condo development in Crystal Bay, okay, don't get me started on what happened with the Biltmore, but we need to have more rental options, period. And, there are some creative ways to think about it. You've been here a long time. I'll say the Emergency Warming Center, a lot of people said at the beginning, oh my gosh, it's just a Band-Aid. Are you kidding me? You're only open, but you know what? Band-Aids stop bleeding. And we need to have a couple more of those right now. We need to reinstate the program where we give a person a one-night motel stay. We're working on with St. Francis to get that going again. We also are looking at safe parking programs where people who are living in their cars, we don't want people living in their cars. The reality is they are, and they're being moved along because parking on residential streets isn't allowed. We're trying to work on new programs that give safe places for people to not be bothered overnight, have a place to take care of their basic necessities, and there's going to be more conversation in the community about that too. So we need both the Band-Aids, and we need the housing ER, and we need the housing whole rehabilitation around here, and we've got to keep our eye on all those. So, Brad.
We haven't had a congressman or a senator or even a commissioner from this area in a long time. The only elected representatives we have in the area are for our local general improvement district. Has there been any effort to try and get IFGID to at least be a local voice?
Yeah, IFGID is part of this workforce housing partnership, and they're feeling the pinch too. And they are hands in because it's hurting the community, and the county commissioner is coming to these meetings. So put a prayer on it. Thank you, everybody.